Sit comfortably wherever you are. Let your hands rest and allow your feet to soften into whatever surface supports them. Take a slow, gentle breath in through your nose, long enough that your belly rises, and then let the breath go through your mouth. A soft sigh as the shoulders drop. Breathe in again, slow and quiet. Breathe out heavier this time as the muscles along your jaw and around your eyes ease. Keep this steady rhythm of breath in and out, like the soft rocking of a boat on a calm lake. Now imagine, as you breathe out, a single warm ray of light finding its way to you. It is slow and kind, not too bright, simply warm. Picture it first touching your toes, a gentle heat that loosens the toes and the arches, then rising like honey running up the limbs, relaxing ankles, calves, and knees. With every breath, the light moves further up, warming the thighs, the hips, the soft belly. Let that warmth settle into your chest and back, loosening tight places, smoothing each rib as though the light is smoothing a sheet. It drifts to your shoulders, down the arms to fingertips, and then up the neck to cradle the throat. Finally, it wraps the head, the forehead unwrinkling, the eyelids heavy and light at the same time. You are warm. You are steady. You are safe. When you are ready, keep breathing quietly and follow that warm light with your mind as it travels to a special place. A peaceful woodland called Grugglewig Wood. The light slips between branches, pockets of shadow and gold, and there, beneath the boughs and moss, is a small stone cottage with a round wooden door and a tall chimney curling smoke like a sleeping dragon. A wooden sign hangs crookly by a leather thong. Hogwarts Lee Story. The letters are carved with a gentle hand, and the sign rocks minutely in the breeze. Deep inside this cottage lives a wizard named Zedra. He is kind in a way that is slow and sure, the sort of kind that feels like warm tea in a cold hand. Zedra has hair the color of soft ash and eyes that remember things for you when you cannot. He lives alone, though he is never lonely, because the whole wood is his neighbor. His home is part hearth and part library, part kitchen and part workshop. Every shelf bending slightly under the weight of spells and memories. This morning, or perhaps it is afternoon, for time in Grugglewig Wood takes its own gentle shape, Zedra stands by a large brass bowl on a heavy wooden table. The bowl is unusual, tarnished with use, rimmed with tiny runes that sparkle faintly when the light catches them. Within, a doughy mixture swells and sighs as though content to be tended. Zedra stirs with a long wooden rod, worn smooth in the same place where his father once held it. With each circle of the wand from right to left, in a slow figure-8 pattern, the mixture becomes more pliant. It breathes slightly as it grows. On the table beside the bowl rests the Magikai Ararium, a cupboard of old oak carved with leaves and knots that speak of long decades. The Ararium is not ordinary furniture. It has 6 narrow shelves, each lined with bottles of glass and ceramic, shaped like small sleeping animals and crooked little towers. Each bottle contains golden sap from the oldest trees, thick as syrup and sunlit within. Every bottle holds more than a liquid. Each holds a single gentle magic, kindness, joy, gratitude, patience, courage, and a dozen more. The bottles are not silent. If Zedra lingers too long in thought, they murmur and clink together like a far-off choir asking to be chosen. There are iron brackets in the shape of large hands that cradle the cupboard. These hands stretch or shrink to welcome the seasons and the amounts within. When the bottles are full, the aerarium is compact and content. When they empty, it loosens and sighs, as if asking for refilling. Today, the hands show a slight slackness, a soft sign that the sap has run low. Zedra notices this. He lets out a small breath, and a tiny smile passes over his face. Gentle as morning light on bark, Zedra's companion, Lucky, arrives before he can move. A woodpecker with feathers the color of chestnut and a curious white dot between his eyes. Lucky is small but bold, and he loves two things more than almost anything: tapping at tree bark and leaning on Zedra's shoulder. The bird raps a friendly patter at the top of the porch as Zedra opens the door. Sunlight floods the entryway, warm as a blanket, and Lucky flutters in, landing just so on Zedra's right shoulder. "You look like you need a walk." Lucky chirps in a voice that is more a hush than a sound. Zedra laughs softly, a sound like a stream around pebbles. He tucks the sap horn under his arm, an ancient curved vessel carved from horn and stitched with old leather, sealed with a woven linen plug tied neat with a thin string. The horn is the sort of thing that remembers every tree it has touched. Together, Zedra and Lucky step into the forest. The path is carpeted with old leaves and soft moss. Each step is muffled, which the two of them appreciate. Birdsong threads through the air, an intermittent percussion, and somewhere off to the right, a brook runs slow and bright. The trees of Grugglewig Wood are generous, broad-trunked elders, with bark like scaled armor and crowns that filter the sky into pieces of light. It is from these trees that the golden sap is taken, a sweetness so ancient it tastes of summers long kept. Lucky leads, tapping and knocking with a practiced rhythm until they find the right tree. He pecks in a small, neat circle. The tree offers a single bead of golden sap, and the horn fills. Zedra listens to the tree as he collects, whispering a thank you that the bark seems to answer. They fill the horn to the brim, seal it, and with a flick of the wand, the sap is preserved, simmering faint and promising within. On their way back, Lucky chatters of news. The forest has welcomed many new denizens: foxes with quick eyes, hedgehogs curled like wishes, deer that move like shadows of grace. Animals from neighboring woods have come, seeking the safe warmth of Grugglewig Wood. Zedra listens, a thoughtful frown knitting his brow for a moment. More mouths, more nests, his duties as guardian swell. But before worry grows as the mixture does in his bowl, Lucky reassures him. The wood has always been generous. Animals share. Paths widen. Trees give up hollows. Nests are built in tandem. The community has done what it always does. It gathers, tends, and makes room. That's kindness to help kindness. Lucky peeps, tapping his beak on Zedra's shoulder as if to punctuate the thought. Back in the cottage, sunlight pours in like a shawl. The aerarium is aware already. The iron hands begin to lengthen as the cupboard senses the new sap. Zedra opens the door with a soft word, a chant that rolls slow and cozy, like oats pouring into milk. The bottles, once murmuring, stand attentive as he withdraws the linen plug and pours new sap into each vessel. The liquid settles, golden and sure, and the bottles breathlessly accept it, feeling themselves replenished. The aerarium closes, hands tucking inwards as if satisfied. Zedra turns to the bowl. The dough has risen higher and is now airy and warm to the touch. He holds the wooden rod like a conductor, guiding a slow, steady rhythm. He has a plan that grows quiet and steady in his mind to make cakes for kindness. Cakes that are not merely sweet, but that hold a small helping of magic. A warmth that helps others feel held and seen. He takes 2 bottles from the aerarium with care. One labeled kindness and another labeled joy. Their labels are painted in tiny brushstrokes, turquoise for kindness, a deep purple for joy, and each bottle hums with a different harmony. The rest of the bottles fall silent, not in envy but in understanding. Today, it is kindness and joy that will be shared. With a practiced hand, Zedra pours the sap into the bowl. The moment it touches the dough, a scent rises, not just of sugar and spice, but of afternoons in sunlit meadows, of hands wrapped around small warm paws, of laughter too soft to be more than a breeze. He mixes slowly right to left in a figure 8 that his father taught him. The motion is ancient, as habitual as breathing, and the dough listens and obeys. It grows and grows until it spills gently over the rim, and then, in a whimsical way, keeps rising, pushing a little curl of steam that smells like safety. A broad silk sheet, crimson as late summer berries, flutters in as though called by the aroma. It swoops around the bowl and lifts the dough, cradling it. Zedra directs the fabric with a flick of his wand. The sheet molds to the shape of the cakes forming within, each one a small, warm mound filled with kindness and dusted with joy. The sheet holds them as a nest would hold eggs, careful and patient dot as they rise. Zedra conjures small red silk squares, each the size of a child's handkerchief. They whistle in on a light breeze and arrange themselves in a line like helper birds. Each square takes a pile, lifts carefully, and flies out into the wood. The sheets know the paths and light, and they travel silently, leaving behind the faint smell of baking and the memory of warmth. The night moves gently on. Under a sky that dims gradually from blue to indigo, the silk squares distribute cakes. Each animal that receives one tastes a little kindness, often without knowing it is magic. A fox finds a cake beside her den, and feeling kinder than before, tucks her cubs closer. A hedgehog samples a crumb and curls less tightly, more trusting of the near dark. Even the beetles and moths are given slivers, and the spells adjust, gentler for the small, broader for the large, each one woven carefully to suit its recipient dot by the time the moon is a silvery coin. The cakes have been shared with almost every creature in Grugglewig Wood. The aerarium, now refilled, hums a satisfied note. The iron hands relax. The bottles chatter softly in contentment, like a group of friends sharing a quiet joke. Zedra cleans his rod and sets the brass bowl to one side. He and Lucky share a small cup of warm root tea, a kind that tastes faintly of cinnamon and old stories. They sit by the window and watch the wood breathe. There are small changes the next morning. Paths that were narrow have softened into new joining ways. New nests appear tucked into hedgerows, and the air carries a different feeling, lighter, a little brighter, As if the whole wood has sighed and felt relieved, Zedra looks to his workbench. There is a map rolled there, old and creased, with a soft pencil circle around a place named the Hollow where lost things sleep. He has found, in his time, that places like that matter in small ways to those who wander. For now, he lets it lie. His rest is needed before any further journeys. He hums a quiet tune, and Lucky, perching on his shoulder, hums back too. The house settles around them like a hand on a book, before sleep takes him, and we will follow that slow drift in the coming parts. Zedra remembers his father's words. Magic, like warmth, is best when shared slowly and often. He smiles and allows his eyes to close, breathing as gently as the forest breathes, knowing there are more days ahead to tend the wood, to craft more little comforts, and to answer the softer mysteries that move beneath the root and stone. Breathe slow once, like turning a page. The cottage sits warm behind Zedra and Lucky as they step out, the map rolled soft in Zedra's satchel. The morning is a thin, pearly light. Dew sleeps on every leaf. Today, the route to the hollow where lost things sleep will begin with small, careful steps. Zedra tightens the strap of the satchel and checks the satchel's small pockets. He chooses a handful of comforts to carry. A cloth-wrapped loaf of the kindness cakes, a narrow jar of sap labeled memory, a brass thimble that belonged to his grandmother and always fits any small knot, and a thin scarf that keeps out the chill without fuss. He wraps the map in waxed cloth and pins it with a silver leaf tack that always points north, even when the world plays tricks. Lucky hops onto Zedra's shoulder, alert and buoyant. The wood peeks awake. An owl blinks in slow surprise, and a family of mice scurries under a root. The first step onto the moss road is like stepping onto a story. It bends slightly beneath their feet and sings a quiet note of welcome. The moss road is a living thing. It remembers where every foot has trod and hums new stories to those who listen. As they walk, the moss shifts in patterns, sometimes a soft green carpet, sometimes a braid of tiny ferns, sometimes a ripple of blue lichen that tickles the soles. Zedra and Lucky move with the road's breathing. Forward, pause, step lightly. This is not a rush. The hollow is patient. Soon, they pass the hollow pool, a shallow mirror where every morning the sky checks its hair. Today, the pool shows a sky threaded with pale clouds and the faint shape of something drifting beneath the surface. A leaf that looks a little like a memory. Zedra kneels and touches the water. It tastes faintly of chamomile and old stories. He takes a pebble and lets it skip once, then twice. The pool blinks and the ripple carries a tiny echo of a lost song, indistinct enough to be comforting. A hush gathers as they approach the willow of soft answers. The willow's branches brush the path and whisper. It has been known to help travelers by untangling small knots in thought. Lucky pecks gently at a dangling leaf. The willow answers in a voice like slow rain. You carry a map, it says. You carry warmth. What is it you hope to find in the hollow? Zedra breathes and replies like a person unwrapping a memory. I hope to find small things that no longer know their way. Lost mittens, a single wooden button, a lullaby misplaced between floors. I hope to return them or to learn where they rest, so stories are whole again. The willow hums and allows them through, its branches parting like curtains. For a beat, the path narrows into a green tunnel, and a dusting of fallen willow leaves mats the air like confetti. At the tunnel's end, the world opens to a low valley. It smells faintly of moss and sugar. On the valley floor, strewn under a gentle bowl of earth, sit little things: a spool of thread, a silver hairpin, a single bootlace, and a faded ribbon. They sit in gentle clumps, as if arranged by absent hands. The hollow is not loud. Its treasures are small and content to be small. Zedra sets his satchel beside him and lays out a linen square. He sorts quietly, naming each item aloud with care, so that every lost piece knows it is noticed. When he speaks, the items seem to settle more firmly into themselves. Lucky flutters to a low mound and taps something with his beak. It is a toy bell with one note that used to ring every evening on a windowsill. The bell looks a little dull and lonely. Zedra takes it and wipes it with his sleeve. The sound it makes is soft as a yawn, and the bell seems pleased to be handled dot as they move through the hollow. The map in Zedra's satchel stirs faintly. It is not a map that only shows places. It also remembers how things felt when they were whole. When Zedra pauses by a sun-warmed stone and unfolds the map, the ink breathes faintly and a pencil line brightens, pointing to a place beneath a bed of ferns where a child's lost lullaby sleeps like a tucked ribbon. The map's voice is soft, a little whisper that only those leaning close can hear. The hollow is generous with hints. Sometimes it gifts a scent, lavender, rope, old paper that leads nearer. Sometimes it offers a small image, the shadow of a mitten on a patch of light. Zedra follows these hints like breadcrumbs, gentle and slow. Each discovery is handled with gratitude. He does not pry. He asks politely, and the hollow replies in its own time. At midday, they rest under a low arch of rock that has the weathered face of an old friend. Zedra unrolls the cloth covering his, loaf, and offers a slice to Lucky and a thin ribbon of bread to himself. The sap of memory sits open, and he dabs a fingertip, tasting nothing sharp, merely the warmth of long afternoons and half-remembered names. He thinks of all the small things that matter: a button sewn wrong, a note folded twice, a lost street lamp's key. The hollow does not keep everything forever. What it keeps with care. A visitor arrives without announcement. A fox with gray-tipped ears and eyes like soft coal. Her name is Morrow. She moves with the kind of silence that courtesies use as she carries a small bundle in her teeth. Her arrival is neither startling nor rushed. It is simply part of the hollow's rhythm. "I think I lost this near the lane by the Honeygate," she says, laying a little wooden flute on the stone by Zedra's hand. "It has a song for rain on it. I thought it was safe with me, but the hollow must hold it now." Morrow's voice is low and careful. She sits and rests her head on her paws. Lucky pecks the flute lovingly. Zedra smiles and tucks the flute gently into his satchel. "We'll listen to it again by the brook," he says. "Lost things like to be found slowly." They set off together, the trio moving like a small story on the move. The hollow guides them through a narrowing of moss and through a grove where mushrooms grow in a tidy ring. Each ring has a little pulse, a tiny echo for the things that have rested too long. Zedra lays a hand on the puffed cap of an old mushroom. Its size and a small ribbon stirs at its base. A ribbon that once belonged to someone who loved to braid stories into her hair dot as afternoon unfurls. Zedra notices a faint shimmer ahead. A circle of stones standing rim high, each stone carved with a child's careful scrawl of a remembered name. It is a place where small things gather, a patch of the hollow that acts like a waiting room. In its center sits a small chest, no larger than a bread box, with a lid that refuses to stay shut on its own. It creaks open at the sight of Zedra. With a polite sigh, and within lie tiny papers folded into cranes, keys tied with twine, a lone mitten that smells faintly of rain, and a single photograph whose edges are soft. Zedra handles each with a respect like reading a letter. He takes the photograph and holds it up to the light. It shows two children sharing an umbrella, both laughing, the rain blurred but kind. He cannot say who they are, but his chest warms at the look of being remembered. He places the photo carefully back into the chest and closes the lid an inch. And the chest thanks him with a whisper that sounds like turning pages. Evening comes slowly. The hollow's light narrows to a fine thread of gold. Zedra prepares a small place to sleep, a blanket of fern and soft lichen, tucked under the roots of an old birch whose bark curls like the pages of a book. Lucky curls against his neck, and Morrow chooses a tucked hollow between rocks. Zedra lays the map on his chest and watches as its lines dim to gray. He breathes with the same slow rhythm as the hollow, steady and unhurried. Before settling, he reaches into his satchel and pulls out the wooden flute. He lifts it to his lips and plays one slow, careful note, a note that fits the valley's shape. It does not demand attention. It simply reverberates like a memory shifting in sleep. The flute's sound stirs the hollow gently, and somewhere far off, a tiny bell answers, as if by agreement. They sleep wrapped in the quiet of the hollow, where lost things breathe easier knowing they are polite guests. Zedra dreams not of traveling, but of returning things to small hands. He dreams of maps that remember faces and arboretum models that never run dry. Dawn unwraps the hollow like a soft letter. Zedra wakes to the smell of wet earth and the small, steady breathing of his companions. He slips the wooden flute from his satchel and hands it to Morrow, who nudges it with a nose that knows the shape of songs. The fox smiles in a way that is almost like a bow and tucks the flute into her bundle for safekeeping. They fold the blanket of fern and set off, following a pale thread on the map that had brightened overnight. The line leads toward a low, mist-soft valley known as the Lantern-Fen, a place where forgotten light pools and keeps company with lost sounds. The map's whisper is quieter here, like a thought spoken under a lid. On the way they meet Brian the Otter, who lounges on a riverbank, polishing something round with a strip of reed. It glints with a little moon-bright flash. "That's a moon pebble," Zedra says. "They're not lost like socks. They're lost like questions." Brian is pleased to see the pebble recognized. "I found it when the river was telling its secrets," he says. "But I can't keep the light to myself. It wants to travel at night." Zedra offers a slice of cake. Brian takes it with small, grateful hands and promises to lead them to the fen's edge, where the air smells of warm lamps and cool tea. Lucky flutters ahead, tapping excitedly on reeds as if counting bases dotted the fen. Lanterns hang from the stubby birches like slow fireflies. They do not blaze. They simply hold a small, steady, remembering glow. Lost lights live here. Candle ends, broken lantern lenses, a childhood glow stick that once traced galaxy letters in a backyard. The light is mild and patient, and it knows how to wait for a hand. Zedra listens before he speaks. He pulls from his satchel the jar of memory sap and uncorks it just enough to let a drop hover on his fingertip. He does not pour. He offers. Memory sap is honest. It will not return what was never whole, but it will soothe edges and make a thing comfortable with being itself again. They find a small pool where the moon pebble wants to sit. Brine sets it gently into the shallow water. The pebble hums like a bell swallowed by the tide. The pool accepts the pebble and gives back a ripple that shows a memory. A child leaning on a dock at dusk, whispering a promise to the moon. The pebble had kept that promise safe until now. Nearby, a lantern with a cracked chimney trembles slightly. Inside, a moth stirs and lifts. It seems to have been holding a half-remembered direction for someone who once needed courage to walk back home. Zedra leans forward and speaks softly to the moth, naming the thing it holds in a voice that is more question than command. The moth answers in the flutter of wings, and the lantern steadies. Its glow knitting a small path through reeds. They gather a handful of small lights and songs. A lullaby that had been tucked inside a torn sleeve. A glass bead that hums a single childhood laugh. A paper star whose color has faded, but whose crease remembers the hand that folded it. Zedra tucks them in soft cloths and numbers them with a tiny stitch of thread, not to own them, but to keep them organized by the way they want to be given back. When the map brightens again, it points to a bridge made of driftwood and iron nails. It says, with a hush, that there is a thing there that remembers being needed, a pebble that once fit into the pocket of a coat of someone who left and never came back. Zedra remembers the hollow's earlier photograph of children in the rain. Perhaps the pebble belongs to that rainy day dot at the bridge. They meet an old toad named Maras. He sits very still and watches frogs leap like punctuation marks. In his throat, there is a soft scratch. His old lantern is missing its wick, and its heart, a small metal button that clicked like a quiet clock, has gone astray with the current. I used to keep watch so small travelers wouldn't wonder, Maris says. But wicks grow thin, and buttons are adventurous. Zedra kneels and listens to the bridge. The wood creaks in polite conversation and offers a loose plank that hides a crevice beneath. Lucky raps at the plank, and a small clink answers. Zedra reaches in and brings out a button dulled by water. He holds it against his heart and murmurs a stitch of warmth. The button brightens like a thought coming back into focus. He gives the button to Maris, who sews it into his lantern with a grin that is almost like a lantern flame. Maris tests his light and nods, satisfied. Keep a small flame near your pockets, he says, so lost things know you look for them. With evening leaning close, the map's ink lines slide toward a low hill called the Moonwell, a shallow spring where moonlight likes to drink. The flute's note from the hollow seems to echo in the map now, leading the way with a melody that is hushed but sure. They reach the Moonwell by a path woven with starflowers. tiny blossoms that only open at dusk. Someone has placed tiny stones around the well's lip, like a child building a neat, careful crown. Zedra sets his satchel down and arranges the small lights and sounds carefully on the stones, as if offering them tea. One by one, each object is touched to the water. The moon pebble hums and melts into the first ripple. The paper star unfolds back a memory of fingers that had once counted constellations. The lullaby drifts like steam and settles into the air where it becomes bright enough to be hummed aloud. The moonwell drinks gently and returns a small, bright thread that floats upward, not a thing to be taken, but a path to watch for. A new, narrow road of glimmering dew that points toward home. They watch until the dew path fades. Brine slips the moon pebble back into his pocket with a promise to carry its light to anyone with sleepless nights. Morrow tucks the flute near her teeth, humming a soft rain-like pattern. Zedra folds the map and places it back into the satchel. The map's lines settle like ink drying. The bottle of memory sap has used only a few drops. It remains steady and patient. They camp on the moonwell's berm, laying their heads where starflowers brush their cheeks. Zedra traces the map with a fingertip and thinks of the photograph he found in the hollow. He wonders gently whether some lost things are meant to travel until their owners are ready to receive them again, and whether sometimes owners must grow into the shape of what was lost. Tucks his head beneath Zedra's chin and sighs. The little lights of Lantern-Fen hang over them like promises. The night is full of small, steady sounds. The river's very slow talk, the soft creak of the bridge, the distant tapping of a tree that keeps time. Dawn is thin and silver. The dew path from the moonwell leads them toward a place called Raingate, where lost names hang like laundry on a line and puddles remember footsteps. Zedra packs the satchel. Lucky flutters nervously. Morrow tucks the flute back in her bundle, and Brine paddles alongside where the path meets a slow canal. The map hums a short, clear note and points them to a cobbled lane lined with small shops that keep their windows half open like listening mouths. Here live things that often slip away. Buttons that fall between floorboards of the cobbler's shop, umbrella tops that lose their handles in gutters, and keys that forget which door they were made for dot at the cobbler's. A bell made of hammered brass rings when they enter. The cobbler, a woman named Edda, with oil-smudged fingers and a voice like careful stitching, sits mending a shoe as if it is a letter. She looks up and holds out a small, damp bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. A key turned up in a puddle last week, she says. It's been muttering like a clock with the wrong hour. I couldn't place it. Zedra unwraps the bundle. Inside lies a small iron key, its bow worn smooth by many pockets. It tastes faintly of rain and bread crusts. The key hums when Zedra holds it, as if remembering a lock. He asks the key, softly, if it remembers a door. It answers with a small warmth that points toward the high terrace above the lane. A row of 10 painted doors, each with a brass knocker shaped like something different. While they climb, Lucky spots a scrap of cloth snagged on a nail, the same faded ribbon from the hollow's chest. It leads them to door number 7, painted a tired blue. Zedra presses the photograph he found in the hollow to the wood. The photograph which had been quiet and small, gives a single clear flutter of recognition. The blue paint seems to respond under his palm. Edda produces a thin hammer and offers to test the key in the row of doors. The key slides into the lock of door 7 with a polite click that sounds like a relieved breath. Inside, a small room smells of boiled tea and chalk. A low bed holds a box of folded raincoats. On the wall, a single umbrella handle hangs on a peg. The umbrella handle has carved initials that match the photograph's margin. From the far corner of the room comes a soft sound, the rustle of turning pages. An elderly woman sits by the window with a tea-stained mug and a stack of letters tied with string. Her name is Anya, and when she looks up and sees the photograph, something like mourning opens in her face. "That was my sister," she says, voice thin but steady. "We used to stand under this umbrella in a rain that laughed." Her hands tremble, and she reaches for the photograph as if to cradle a small bird. Zedra places the photograph gently in Anya's hand. The room's air rearranges itself. The umbrella handle seems steadier on the peg. The raincoats lean together like friends, and the key in Zedra's palm grows warm, as if it too remembers being held. Anya does not remember every name from the old days, but she remembers the shape of laughter and the way the umbrella clicked when it closed. The photograph settles into her lap, as though it has finally found the story it wanted to sit inside. Before they leave, Anya folds the photograph back to the size of a coin and ties a new string around her letters. She stands and unlocks a small drawer, offering Zedra a strip of leather stamped with an old emblem. "For your satchel," she says, "so things that like pockets will feel at home." She kisses the brass of the key with a smile that steadies its song. The key answers with a tiny, happy clink dot outside. The lane smells of warmed bread and wet stone. Brine pockets the moon pebble in a stitch of promise. Morris, who has joined them again, murmurs about keeping a light near the canal's lip. Morrow plays a short tune on the flute, not loud, just enough for Puddles to remember the pattern of small feet, and the Raingate seems to nod. The map glows faintly and points them onward. Toward the outskirts, where a willow leans like someone eavesdropping on the sky, Zedra tucks the key and the strip of leather into his satchel, feeling the satchel's weight like a tally of gentle duties. He thinks of Anya's hands and the photograph's smile and knows, without hurry, that some returns are small and seismic at once. They walk beneath the willow. Lucky hums. The path ahead keeps its secret for a moment longer, but the map's line twitches with expectation. Night will come soon, and with it, a place that remembers songs lost at sea. Early morning pushes them toward the shore. Salt air, the scrape of pebbles, and the map's line leading to the tidal pier, a place where a lost sound can nestle into a small bottle and a forgotten thing can cling to an anchor. On the dock, they meet an old lamp and a man named Silas, whose voice sounds like steps on wet boards. He shows them a glass bottle caught among shards. Inside is a melody, compressed like breath. The bottle trembles, but won't release the song. Silas explains that the tune once lived in a child's hand and melted into the sea during a storm. Freeing, the melody is a gentle, precise task. The song needs a familiar body, sound, light, and memory. The team has what's needed. Morrow brings the flute, an instrument that smooths sounds. Brine carries the moon pebble, a resonance for night notes. Zedra holds a drop of memory sap to soften the memory's edges. Lucky is a tiny rhythm keeper who likes tapping on stones. They sit in a circle by the tide, place the bottle on a towel, and work carefully. Brine sets the moon pebble in a shallow pool. It shivers and sends a little shine across the surface. Morrow plays one pure, warm tone, not for listening, but for reminding. Zedra drops a bead of memory sap on the bottle's rim and whispers the thing the song once belonged to, the lullaby by the pier. Lucky keeps a light beat, and the flute weaves a path the melody can follow back into the world. The bottle shakes more. A thread of light appears inside, and the melody slips out, thin and wet, like the first rain. It doesn't run away. It travels like a vessel down a channel toward a cottage on the shore where the song's owner waits. The wave of music kindles memory. Inside the cottage, an old man named Tomas slows his hand, hears the familiar tune, and smiles for the first time in a long while. He finds an old box with a seaside brooch, the thing the song had always guarded. Warmth returns to his home. While Thomas accepts the return, the team helps with other small recoveries. They gather lost bells, net fragments, and old lantern pieces around the pier. Silas repairs his beacon, fitting in the little metal button Marius found, and the light begins to blink confidently again. Before they leave, Brine gives the moon pebble to Tomas, not to take away his care, but so the night will have a companion that won't let the music drift off again. Zedra drops another bead of memory sap on the map. Its lines glow briefly and point onward to more small things that prefer to come back on their own route home. They look out at the rising tide and listen to the sea whispering new stories. Songs have returned to homes. The lamp shines, keys and buttons settle into pockets. The team gathers their things. The map content cools to a gentle gray, a sign it's time to move on. Zedra takes away the quiet lesson. The map keeps repeating. Sometimes a lost thing returns not because it's chased, but because it's called back softly with memory and light. They set off along the shore, unhurried, hearing the tide carry the last notes toward the next story. The map's line trembles and leads them beneath a willow that leans over a shallow, mirror-still pool, the tree known to the village as the eavesdropping willow, because its leaves keep gossip like coins in a purse. The willow listens to passing footsteps, forgotten promises, and the hush of afternoons. Today it holds something small and stubborn, the single-minute hand of the town clock, buried in its roots where it refuses to move. Without that hand, hours have been loose, kettles boil late, shutters open too early, and goodbyes miss the right moment. People remember the shape of their days, but not the boundaries. The town is gentle but untidy. Task. Coax the minute hand out and help it remember its place inside the clock tower. This requires three things: a memory to anchor the hand, a rhythm to guide its motion, and a light to show its face. Each team member contributes. Morrow provides steady, warming rhythms on the flute. Lucky taps a clear beat on the willow roots. Brine sets the moon pebble on the water so the pool throws back a patient silver. Zedra brings memory sap to ease the hand's fear of forgetting. Maris, who's been traveling with them, finds a sun-sliced mirror to aim a little blaze of day that they sit in a small ring. Zedra whispers a memory into the sap, a simple, faithful one. Tea at 4 with laughter stitched into the steam. He lets a drop fall across the willow's roots and into the soil where the metal sleeps. Morrow plays a slow, careful measure. Lucky keeps time with a percussion that is almost a question. The moon pebble glows like a quiet compass. The willow listens, then breathes, roots loosen. Mud sighs. The minute hand, dark with years, lifts as if waking from a long nap. It trembles, smelling of clock oil and warm bread. But it is small and uncertain. It needs a place to lock into. They carry it together up the lane to the clock tower. The town gathers. A baker, a seamstress, a small child who hums a counting rhyme. Zedra fits the hand to its hub. At first, it hangs limp. Then Morrow plays the rhythm they kept by the willow. Lucky taps the same beat on the tower stone. Maris angles the mirror so sunlight spills into the clock face. And Brine presses the moon pebble against the metal to steady the heart of night. The memory sap warms the joint's dot with a soft, delighted clunk the hand catches. Time resumes its polite march. Windows blink in unison. The baker pulls bread at the right hour. A mother remembers to call her son at tea. People clap softly, not out of triumph, but out of relief. Things are where they belong again. Before they go, the willow murmurs a thank you in a rustle that smells faintly of old paper. It keeps a token, a curling strip of the clock's paper face, which Zedra tucks into his satchel as a reminder that time can be misplaced and also returned. The map brightens and points onward toward a place where voices sleep in bottles and promises hang from branches. Zedra walks on with the team, feeling the subtle steadiness of a town whose minutes are reunited. The lesson the map repeats sounds clearer now. Some things are small and indispensable. They just need the right company to come home. The map's line leads them into an old orchard where every branch is threaded with ribbons and small glass jars. The villagers tie promises here, vows to visit, to forgive, to return in owed favor, and put a sleeping voice inside a bottle beside each ribbon, so the promise can be heard later. Lately, many jars have gone mute. Ribbons sag. The orchard smells of rain, and unfinished sentences dot at the heart of the trees. Lives Ida, the orchard keeper, who greets them with a basket of fallen notes. She explains, a particular promise is unspooled, a jar with a voice that used to call someone home. Without it, a daughter didn't return to her father's bedside. Ida's hands shake when she points to the empty branch. Their task, wake the bottle's voice and restore the promise, so the daughter will hear the call and decide to come back. This needs a word that remembers true names, a shape for the promise to hold, and grace so the voice trusts being heard again. Teen contributions. Zedra offers memory sap to soften the voice's fear. Morrow plays a small naming melody on the flute. Brine sets the moon pebble under the jar to steady night's hush. Lucky taps a hopeful rhythm on a hollow branch. Mara stresses a ribbon with a sun thread to catch passing light. They sit beneath the loaded branches. Zedra uncorks the jar. The air smells like old linen and salt. Inside is a thin, nearly vanished sound. Not a full sentence, but a name half remembered. Zedra breathes memory sap on the rim and murmurs the promise that once held the voice. Come when the first bread is warm. Morrow's flute shapes the name into a clear note. Lucky's taps form the walking time. Brian's pebble hums like a small moon. The ribbon brightens. The voice stirs and recoils, afraid of being called and then ignored. Ida steps forward and ties her own promise next to it. I will wait by the warm hearth. Her steady, plain words act like a net. The voice gathers courage and swells into a whole sentence. Clear as a bell, I will come. The ribbon tightens, the jar rings, and a breeze carries the sound along the lane toward the daughter's cottage. At dusk, the daughter, who had been away mending nets in a distant cove, pauses at a bakery window, nose full of warm bread. She hears the familiar call, and her feet decide. She walks back through the orchard, and father and daughter meet beneath the hung promises. No ceremony, only two hands finding each other, and a loaf split between them. Before they leave, Ida offers the team a small token, a ribbon braided from old promises, to remind them that vows must be kept tenderly. The map's line glows and moves on. Zedra notes the quiet lesson. Promises live when named, answered, and tended, not forced, but invited. The map's line unwinds one last time and carries them to a small, sheltered harbor where paper boats bob like folded breaths. A lantern hangs from a mast of driftwood, and its light pools on a key stitched with names. The map itself feels thin here, worn at the edges, as if it has been reading other people's endings for too long. At the center lies a shallow basin of water, and on its surface, a single blank fold of paper waits to be filled. The map's last memory has washed loose. It must remember why it guided others, so it can stop drifting and be put away. Their final task is simple and careful. Give the map a true story to keep. Set a tide that will carry that story safely. And close the fold so the map may rest. Each team contributes one final gift. Zedra pours the last of his memory sap into a poundful of seawater, a soft preservative for stories. Morrow plays a wandering tune that smells like homecoming. Lucky taps a steady oar beat on the key so the harbor knows when to breathe. Brian places the moon pebble at the basin's rim to hold night steady. Morris balances the sun-sliced mirror so a single beam lights the paper's center. Ida, who has followed them quietly, offers the braided ribbon of promises and the phonesis, and the Maida, strip of clock face paper from the willow. They set the tokens on the blank fold. A ribbon, a piece of clock paper, a jar's faint voice, the pebble, and the soft glow of the map itself. Zedra tells, simply and clearly, the story the map most needs to carry. A story of small things returned, of a town whose minutes found their hand, a daughter who heard her name, and sailors who came back at last. Morrow's melody frames it. Lucky's beat becomes the rhythm of a boat setting off. The basin's water listens and takes the memory, sap like salt. The fold accepts the story. The map brightens, its lines thicken and find anchors. Slowly, with a barely audible rustle like leaves settling, it refolds itself and tucks the tokens into a hidden pocket. The harbor answers with a single, long ripple that reaches every quay and boat, a farewell and a benediction. The map does not vanish. Instead, it becomes small and satisfied, tucking its own edge into a drawer in the Lantern Keeper's cottage, a place where maps sleep between journeys. The Lantern Keeper thanks them with a hot cup and a thin smile. Each traveler receives back a small token from the map's pocket. Zedra finds the curling strip of clock face. Morrow the sun thread. Brine the pebble's faint glow. Lucky a splinter of ore wood that keeps time. Maris a sliver of mirror that holds a day. Ida keeps the braided ribbon before they part. The map's last lesson hums on the water. Journeys answer something at the start and give back something at the end. Not always the same thing, but enough to go home by. They walk away from the harbor lighter. The map, folded and quiet, rests where it belongs. The road ahead is not for the map, but for them, and each step carries the small, essential things they found and returned. Asterisk, asterisk, good night, sleep tight.